we have this mentality when it comes to conflict. We're trying to achieve balance. No, that actually is not the case. What we're trying to achieve is understanding. When both parties feel understood and actually understand the other party, you're going to move forward in a way that is healthy and helpful. And I've had so many situations with you where I've been like, I'm maybe 10% wrong, 20% wrong. She's easily 80%, easily 60%. If we're looking at the scale, she's more wrong. She needs to be the one who humbles herself. No, that's not how this works.
Oh, Ad, today we're talking about everyone's favorite topic.
Really? Everyone has a favorite topic?
Conflict.
Wow. That was aggressive. I felt you lean over the way you said that.
That's how I go into conflict.
Like, oh gosh.
Really aggressive. I just want to establish
conflict.
My place in the conflict.
Okay. We've talked about conflict before though. So what's unique about this one?
So this one in particular, we're talking about how to not allow a mistake to turn into a full-blown mess. A crack to turn into a canyon.
I like that one. You just came up with that.
A crumb to turn into a cake.
Oh, wow. That was actually pretty good.
Let me see if I can keep going.
No, stop. Stop. You're good.
They get the idea. To turn into an ocean.
No.
Have you ever been in a situation where, there's something happens, someone genuinely messes up.
Yeah.
But because of any given number of circumstances surrounding it, the thing is no longer what the conflict is about.
Yeah.
It is massive.
And sometimes you don't even remember what started the conflict.
Yeah.
Like the thing is no longer the thing because you don't remember what the thing was.
The conflict becomes the conflict. The conflict conflates.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah, that's a real thing. And when I have conversations with couples who have gone the distance, I think, and they love each other and their marriage is thriving and they have this presence about them. Like, they love each other. You know what I'm saying? Like those older couples, they love each other. Life's good.
Yeah, they can't stop making out.
It's like, I'm not saying PDA, but I mean, maybe that's a part of it. But it's just their life is smooth in this sense, not like it's perfect, but there's just an ease to it. It's like sweet tea, and I don't even drink sweet tea, but it's like sweet tea and honey. It's just nice. It's just got a good vibe to it, right? And when I have conversations with these people, they'll share seasons or moments and stuff where it's just like, wow, like y'all went through some stuff.
Yeah.
Y'all made mistakes. But the thing is, like, they didn't allow those mistakes to turn into a mess that destroyed their connection, their intimacy, their relationship. And I want us to lean into that because I think there is this idea of, well, everyone else's marriage or everyone else's dynamic with their kids or whatever it may be is perfect. Mm-hmm. It's easy. Like we look at the social media version of it. We hear the highlights from other people. They don't share those difficult moments because those aren't the moments that we're particularly proud of. And so it creates this illusion of, hey, this is easy for everyone else. Why isn't it easy for us?
Yeah.
And I would say we bring that energy sometimes into our conflict because there's this expectation. This should be easier. You should be different. You should be better. If you were better, see, this is my intense like conflict voice. If you were better, if you were different, my life would be better. My life would be easier. This would be different. Does that make sense?
It does. And you're so right that those unmet and broken expectations do also add to what takes something kind of simple or could be very easily moved through in a free-flowing situation.
Yeah.
It's like if you were to throw a rock into a stream that already has a lot of sticks and rocks and garbage in it, it's just going to kind of get stuck and become a part of a bigger issue. Yeah. As opposed to if it's free flowing, it's like, it's just going to flow right down and through.
Flow right down, not contribute to the dam that is building that's becoming insurmountable. That's a really good metaphor.
Thanks.
You're flowing with the metaphors. So
I'm
the
most
similes.
proud of the crumb into a cake.
It wasn't that good. Okay. So,
this is gonna be
yeah, here it is. So, and I would say, Julie, too, and we're going to offer some very practical things, 3 things, and then we're going to talk about the 5-1 rule, which I really enjoy. So we're going to talk about 3 things and then the 5-1 rule. Here we go.
This starts to feel like a math equation.
We're doing math homework with our teenagers. No, but I would say this became more real as I've watched your interactions with our teenagers, and I've had the chance to process my own interactions with them after the fact. Where I'm like, I don't know if that needed to get as intense as it got.
It's very true. And then you see it in your own life where you come across a situation and it can just be what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to blow up into something massive. So how? How do you do this? Let's bring it to them from both the perspective of the person who has made the mistake, if it's this simple as a mistake was made.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like there's a spectrum of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's a lot of things we could put within that classifier of mistake. And so we're not saying that all mistakes are created equal. We're not. But what we are saying, we're saying that there are principles that we can move through and bring into our process that make it a lot easier to navigate a mistake, whether the mistake is a level 1 mistake or a level 10 mistake.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give an example of a level 1 or level 10 because I think I'll get blown up in the comments if I give an example. But
give an example of something.
You give an example.
Oh, this is
no, I'm saying a level 10
example.
mistake would be like in a marriage, it'd be like an affair. Like if you look at that, like, hey, that's a level 10 mistake.
But what's like a level 3 to 5 that really has the potential of?
That's a good question. I would say level 3 to 5 would be, hey, you played 3 hours of pickleball the other day, and you didn't, and you didn't tell me you were going to play 3 hours of pickleball. I thought you were going to play an hour of pickleball. That's like a level 3. I wouldn't even say 3 to 5. I'd say like a level 3 mistake. You might think it's higher than that.
No,
but level 3.
I actually agree.
I would say a level 1 mistake is like, hey, you know what? You forgot to rinse your dish and put it in the dishwasher.
Or you were sharp.
Yeah, or you were a little sharp.
You were in a bad state. You were just sharp and responded in a
little sharper than you should have been.
Yeah, that's a level 1.
But I'm telling you, people are going to have a different idea of what belongs at the bottom and what should be at the top.
Okay, so you're the person who's made the mistake.
Yep, person who made the mistake.
You played 3 hours.
Which is typically how it goes in our relationship. I'm the person who's made the mistake.
You played 3 hours of pickleball on a Sunday afternoon when we had a podcast the next day.
Which we had already worked on. Anyway, we'll return to At Home with the Beveres shortly. But first, a quick shout out and big thank you to the fam.
Wait, you have to tell them what the fam is.
Oh yeah, I need to do that. The fam is the community of monthly supporters who make this podcast possible.
We started At Home to help families and marriages flourish in this wild and wonderful world.
There's a lot more we want to do for the thousands of families tuning in, and your monthly support will help us reach and resource more people. If you want to learn more, just click the link in the show description.
Now, let's get back to the episode.
I would say, okay, here's the first step. Really, really practical. And you're going to hear an emphasis on humility here. And we have to understand, like, this is, when we talk about humility, we're not talking about weakness. We're not talking about letting someone run over you. We're talking about that perspective that says, like, hey, I don't know everything. I don't understand everything. So I'm going to engage with curiosity, and I'm going to engage in a way that brings God into the mix, God's Spirit into the mix, because I'm going to create space for God to be God and not try to be God over everything and fix everything and all that, right?
It's also not a humility that is arrogant, which sounds like, how could you have a humility that's arrogant? But the humility that has that religious spirit just smeared all over it.
Schmear. That was a great use of smeared.
Where you're like, I'm going to be humble because I'm humble.
Because you're incapable of being humble.
I'm going to be humble. This is me being humble. Yeah. I'm the humble one.
Yeah, don't do that. That's bad.
So first thing, person who made the mistake.
Humble yourself. I mean, just simple. Like once you realize, y'all, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Once you realize that you've made a mistake, humble yourself. Don't keep digging Don't keep putting your heels into the ground. And here's the thing, you don't have to realize that you're all in the wrong. But once you realize you've done something that wasn't right, own what you did. That's the second thing.
Yeah.
You own it. So the first thing is you humble yourself. And I've had so many situations with you where I've been like, I'm maybe 10% wrong, 20% wrong. She's easily 80%, easily 60%. If we're looking at the scales, at least this is what I'm thinking in the moment. I'm thinking she's more wrong. She needs to be the one who humbles herself. No, that's not how this works. It's not an equation. Going back to your comment earlier about math equations, this is not an equation.
Yeah.
Because when one person loses, both people lose. So this is an equation to be balanced. Keep that in mind, because we have this mentality when it comes to conflict. We're trying to achieve balance. No, that actually is not the case. What we're trying to achieve is understanding. When both parties feel understood and actually understand the other party, you're going to move forward in a way that is healthy and helpful. Until you get to that point, you will be in a constant state of imbalance, no matter who was 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever it is, wrong and right.
Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, the person who was wronged, the first step is humble yourself. Even if you were the one wrong, you humble yourself. And the one who did the mistake, when they come in humble, this pickleball really is coming in handy.
It feels very anecdotal right now.
When they come in humble, it feels silly to then be as fiery. True story. I wrote.
Lizzie told me about the text that you wrote me.
She told you. I wrote out a text.
Oh my
Who
gosh.
do you think?
Who do you think you are?
Playing 3 hours of pickleball
That was
on a Sunday
that was a
afternoon.
long time.
And then she is over my corner, or over my shoulder. She is over my shoulder reading it. And she's like, oh, Mom. And I was like,
this is our 10-year-old daughter.
I said, you're right. That was rude. And I edited it to like, hey, hun.
I was going to say that text seemed really, I don't know what the right word is, but I actually read it later. I'm like, wow, that was really chill.
Hey, hun, when do you think you're going to
When do you think
home?
you're going to get out of the pickleball vortex and come home? Now, it really is both. Like both parties, when you humble yourself in a situation like this, what we do is it allows us to get off our high horse.
Yeah.
Whether you've made the mistake and you're like, it wasn't that bad. Or if the person made the mistake and you're like, no, I'm going to make you suffer to the nth degree because you made that mistake. Either way, you're on a high horse.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of when we humble ourselves, we actually we remember, oh, I'm someone who makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a significant revelation when you're in that like judge and juror mode. Like, you know what? Maybe it wasn't the pickleball vortex, but I was here making a mistake earlier today or 2 days ago or 3 days ago. It's just perspective. Perspective is everything in these moments. And when we humble ourselves, God gives us perspective. It says that God gives grace to the humble, but he opposes the proud. It also says in James 4, it intimates this idea that God lifts us up when we're humble, almost like lifts us up above the clouds of confusion so we can have clarity. And so y'all know what I'm talking about. When you're in those moments where you're in the midst of the cloud of confusion, we need clarity. We're just like, what are we even fighting about anymore? Or why is this so important to me? I don't understand why this is making me so mad, but it is making me really mad. Like, we need to be honest about that. We need to find clarity. And the truth is, when we humble ourselves, we open the door for clarity.
Well,
So-
I love that you said that verse about, or made that comparison with lifting above the clouds, because anger will cloud your mind. I mean, physically, scientifically, chemically, it clouds your rational thinking, where you are
Yes.
unable to have clear, rational thoughts in a state of anger.
But it's incredibly deceptive because nothing is clearer than when you are angry.
Yeah.
So while it does cloud your mind, you think you have perfect clarity. Like, you know what? You are the worst person in the world. Like, you are a complete jerk. Like, how have I not seen this? How have I not known this in that moment? It's so clear. It's like, wait, no. You are conveniently letting go of a lot of truth that you would have to reconcile to get a more complete or perfect view of that person. You're conveniently throwing that to the side to justify the simplicity of your verdict.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dangerous place to be in.
It's a dangerous place to be in as the one getting angry and the one receiving it.
Absolutely.
And a very scary place, specifically for, I mean, not only for women, but for women, because with anger, there's the physical aspects of anger.
Yeah.
And knowing that there's a level here. I know we're using this pickleball example because it's relevant for us, but there is a level of more extreme, like Addison started out saying, talking about a spectrum of mistakes where if your partner or your initial reaction is this very intense anger, and a lot of that does come from what you were exposed to as a child and the way that you saw conflict handled as a child, there's levels of seeking out help that's very, very necessary, where you have trusted people counseling, marriage counseling, individual counseling, where you can work through that anger response. Because like we're saying, 100%, like humble yourself, bring it to God. If there is a cycle here, you need to be intentional to disrupt that cycle. And God is going to provide the tools, the resources necessary for that. Recognize though, that that's not okay. That's not healthy. That's not holy. That's not God's best. That's not a way to move through conflict in marriage that is going to result in closeness, which is the beauty of the gift of conflict.
It is. I want to add something though.
I know you do. Let me just finish.
No, finish.
Is that on the other side of conflict is intimacy.
Yeah.
It's that idea that you have moved through something to a greater something where trust and understanding was built through what could have been what could have taken away from the relationship has now built up the relationship. But I want you to add what you were going to add.
Well, I felt like I was going to lose it. And that's why I was going to interject, because I thought you were done. But I loved what you shared. So I'm glad you got that all out. Anger. You hit on anger, and I feel like we need to just spend a moment there, because so much of anger in these moments, it gets directed at the other person, but a lot of it is anger at oneself. And people don't know how to process that. And sometimes when people are forced to process an emotion in an environment where they already feel vulnerable, or they feel like they're not going to perform or communicate in a way that aligns with how they would want to perform or communicate, that compounds their frustrations and their challenges. And so I would just encourage people, when you hear this, don't get mad at yourself for being angry. The Bible says, do not sin in your anger. It doesn't say do not be angry. It says, do not sin in your anger. There are things worth being angry about, but there's an appropriate response to anger. And when we humble ourselves in those dynamics, when we remove ourselves until we're at a place where we do have clarity, things like that, like we don't have to engage when we're angry. It's okay to withdraw for an appropriate amount of time when you are angry. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're a coward. That doesn't mean that you're running away. It just means that you're aware of what you're navigating and that you need some space so you don't do something that is hurtful to the other person or to yourself.
That's where humility comes in.
Absolutely.
Like in your anger, be humble enough to say, hey, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
I need to take a step back because I don't want to sin in my anger.
Yes.
I don't want to say unkind, hurtful things. I don't want to do something or say something that I don't even really mean. I'm operating in a state that is unclear, that is foggy, that is chaotic. So I'm going to humble myself by saying I need space. To the partner, though, you have to give them some kind of a time frame. You know, if you have young children, if you have older children, if your life is full, I mean, everyone's life falls within one of those.
Yeah.
You do need to give some kind of a, can we come back at this time and finish this discussion? It can't just be, I'm angry, I'm going to withdraw. And then that person is left to feel abandoned and isolated.
Yeah.
Because then there's that cycle.
Even communicating like, hey, I have to withdraw. Can we please continue this in 20 minutes, you know, or a few hours, or hey, I need to leave the house for a bit. I'll be back in a couple hours. Things like, instead of just storming out of the house, Like, hey, I'll be back in a couple hours. I need to go cool off, right? Those types of things, that's a part of communicating in a healthy way. You and I were more disposed to just like work it out and moving through it. But we have seen there are times when one of us, it is helpful for us to take a step back. And I have a very, very good friend who reached out to me because he was navigating some anger and dynamics with his wife. And he felt like he could do something that he would really regret doing. And we had conversation about this and talked about, okay, what are some different things? How do you know you're getting to that point where you could be compromised because of your anger? And he's in a very healthy marriage now. It's thriving, all of that. But it's just, he was humble. He reached out to a friend. He said, hey, I need help with this. Like, if the enemy's going to take me out, this is where the enemy's going to take. Like, he was aware of that. And as we shared earlier, God gives grace to the humble and he opposes the proud. So the third step, so we mentioned first one, humble yourself. Number two, own it as soon as you can. And then I would say on the other one, forgive, right? So own it as quick as you can if you made the mistake, and then forgive as quick as you can. So what people don't understand about forgiveness is that forgiveness comes in layers. So forgive what you know to forgive as soon as possible.
That's
And then
really
you
good.
might have to come back to it and forgive other things later, but don't not start because you can't forgive completely. Like, forgive what you know to forgive as quick as you can forgive.
But on the other side of that, if you are saying, I'm going to forgive what I know to forgive, if then you forgive later, they're like, whoa, 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 I thought you already forgave me.
That's where honestly, that's where communication is key.
So saying, I forgive you for
This, I'm still working through some things. Like, I'm still confused by this. Communicating that to your partner
or
is
this brought up this
that, and
wounding.
I'm working through this. And those types of conversations are really important. I wrote this down. I got to find it. We forgive from a posture of faith. We withhold forgiveness from a posture of fear.
Go into that.
Well, it's when we're forgiving, we're essentially creating space for that person to make a mistake again. We are. And we're essentially saying, within a Christian context, we're saying, like, God, I'm creating space for you to do miraculous work in this person's life. Like, I'm letting them go. I'm entrusting them to you. When we refuse to forgive because of fear, then what we're doing is we're saying, I'm holding all control, all of the cards, and I need to take matters into my own hands.
Yeah.
So now I'm not speaking of situations where there's danger or anything like that. I'm talking about, like, hey, you know what? I don't want to forgive you because I don't want to release you. Because releasing you here feels like I'm letting go of control.
Or I'm laying my hand down.
I'm humbling myself, going back to the first one. I'm humbling myself. And then the third one, and let's share it from both sides. If you're the one who made the mistake, practice patience with the other person's process. You do not get to set the terms for their response. You don't get to dictate what an appropriate healing process looks like. Like, give them space if they need space, but then be intentional. Like, hey, when can we reconnect? How do we move through this? Because the goal is always reconciliation. That is the goal.
Yeah. That's good. And then it's being honest about how the mistake made you feel.
If you're the
you
person
are the one who was the recipient of the mistake made, how that made you feel and what forward does look like for both of you. Now, not making yourself the judge and juror, but recognizing, like, hey, there will be instances like, well, I hope you enjoyed your afternoon of pickleball. I need a little bit of time because our snowed in children are driving me just a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to need some space from them. So I don't want to see you for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. And we move through that.
Yeah.
And then we have conversations about it later and we laugh about it. And this one, again, like, this is a lower mistake, but a more complicated one that we've navigated recently is you processing your father's passing and the mistakes that I would make coming alongside you. that were hurtful, because you would think, I thought you knew me better than this. I thought you would be here with me in this season in a
I thought
different
you would
way.
protect
I
me.
thought you would protect
Yeah.
me from these dynamics, where it was a lot more intimate, a lot more layered. It brought up different seasons of our lives. I mean, even going back to us having conversations about how young we got married and how you transitioned very quickly from being your father's daughter to being my wife. And so that went a lot deeper. And those conversations, it's not as black and white. You made a mistake, you wronged me, and I forgive you. It was very much because of how you responded in certain moments and how I responded in those moments. It was both of us. Like, we both made mistakes,
Yeah.
and it definitely could turn into messes. I mean, very, very layered stuff that we're moving through. But because we sit down, like, no, I want to understand. Like, I want to humble myself, because I'm asking Holy Spirit, how have I missed it? Like, help me see how I missed it. I want to own it. I want to humble myself. I want to repent. I want to apologize. I want to do those things. When we have that heart posture, okay, hey, I want to be patient with your process. I understand, like, this isn't all the boxes aren't going to get checked very quickly. But even for me, as my role with our dynamic, I'm like, but I want to make sure we are moving forward.
Yeah.
We can go at a pace that you feel comfortable with, but we need to be moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. And sometimes moving forward does look like taking a step backwards, but you're aware of that. And y'all, that's why we have to be prayerful as we're navigating these things. Like, if we're going to experience marriage at the level of intimacy and connection,
Yeah.
we have to be people who are prayerful. It's not like, oh, I'm being legalistic about prayer. No, if you don't engage prayerfully, if you're not aware of things that you wouldn't be aware of just through your own eyes, your own ears, perceiving, understanding the situation, if you're not prayerful, you're going to miss out on things that are critical moments in the relationship. I look back at our relationship over 16 years of marriage, and I see moments where I'm like, man, things could have gone very different if we would have engaged differently in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we would have engaged in our flesh.
Yeah.
And it really does. I mean, ideally, both partners are being prayerful, but it really does only take one. Even that example that you just gave of, I mean, this is last month, these moments between us where they felt so big and so layered. And I did just want to retreat. I wanted to be angry, and I wanted to be angry with you because you are here and I can see you and touch you and reconcile with you. And the things that I'm really angry at, I can't. But it was you being prayerful. Even the language you just put to it, I was like, I didn't even know that he really knew that. But trusting that when you're prayerful in a conflict that feels too big for you and that feels chaotic, because a lot of times the conflicts that feel chaotic, there's a spiritual element.
Oh yeah.
And when you can't quite understand where this conflict has, what's the beginning and what's the end, there's a very real spiritual element to it that requires us to ask for God's wisdom, ask for God's guidance to help us see things more clearly, where it is this, hey, we were young and there was this season and there's this season, but here we are now. And here's where God's brought us, and he's not done with us. It doesn't mean those feelings don't have any validation, but it does mean that those feelings don't get the final say. They're going to be put into their place. Those emotions are going to be put into their place. And this requires a prayerful awareness of the Spirit of God that's moving within your relationship and for your good and for your wholeness and for your oneness. Where any kind of separation, which is what conflict done poorly does, it separates, it fragments you. Where conflict done well, it clears away stuff for a fuller, truer wholeness. So that is the most important thing. that we can share in doing conflict well, in keeping mistakes from turning into messes, is being prayerful about the other person, their perspective, that empathy, like really strengthening your empathy muscle where you can see where they're coming from, how they may have said this, but they probably meant this.
Yeah.
Like just grace upon grace when you are in conflict. Now, again, and it always feels like we have to give the disclaimer of if you are within an abusive situation, that's beyond these bounds of healthy, hopeful conflict, not without hope.
Sure.
That's beyond the bounds of healthy, constructive conflict that's
Correct.
moving you forward. But yeah.
And also I would say it's conflict. It's always imperfect, right? Like it's healthy and helpful in hindsight. It rarely feels that way in the moment.
Yeah.
It's rarely like, oh, this is so good. I'm so grateful for this conflict right now. It's doing a good work in us. But I do want to encourage people because I grew up in my family, my parents, like they were crazy when it comes to conflict. Like they're intense and they talk about it. Intense Italian, Sicilian family. My greatest fear growing up that my parents they were gonna get divorced. Like I had dreams of them getting divorced because they were so intense with each other. So I grew up with that as my reality. But I look at my parents and the love they have for each other and the way that they moved through their imperfections and the way that they moved through their conflicts. And they've been very open about this. So I have no problem saying it. It's shown me something about the way God can work and what he can work through and what he can do despite of our weaknesses or our difficult seasons or whatever they may be.
But I have parents who fought similar and they did get divorced twice.
So it's one of those things where it really is like, how are you going to engage the conflict? But I will tell you this, there's something more dangerous than conflict, and it's contempt. It is. And so for those of y'all listening, that's what you need to be afraid of, is sliding into contempt. Because when you get to that point where you just don't really care, you're indifferent toward your spouse, like that is the telltale sign that a relationship is headed to divorce.
Contempt is anger and disgust, but with a superiority. So what you were saying, where there's this level of, it's pride. There's this pride that says it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Like I'm too tired for this. I'm too annoyed by this. They're never going to change. This is never going to change. Just this level of disgust where you're checked out.
Yeah.
You're divorced before the papers have been filed.
Yeah. We said we were going to give them a 5-1 framework, but I feel like maybe we tease that for the next time.
Yeah.
Should we do that?
Yes, because that is definitely applicable to those seasons where it's just like eggshells. If you've ever been in a season of your relationship and marriage, but I've also experienced it in other relationships where it feels like you're just constantly walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And we will save that for another episode where we talk about just very practically.
How do you recover from that? How do you create a new norm in the dynamic?
Facilitate safety.
That felt very millennial of you. Facilitate safety.
I am a millennial.
You are a millennial. Jules, any other thoughts on this one? Should we recap the 3?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, all right. So humble yourself before God. Both of them. Same thing. Humility heals. I think everyone just remember that. Humility heals. Regardless of what side you're on, humility heals. Number 2, own it as soon as you can. Whatever it is, no matter how small it is, own it as soon as you can. And that creates opportunity for the other person to own it as well.
Yeah, something that we say to our...
But that's not the reason why you do it, just to be clear. You don't want to manipulate them
That's
into
good.
doing it.
It's really important.
Just want to call that out.
Something we say to our 15-year-old a lot, who's just in this beautiful season of constantly making mistakes. We say the mistakes you don't own, you can't grow from.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're paying a price and you're not receiving anything in return.
That's so fun.
So own it, forgive it.
Yeah.
What's 3?
There's an old saying, the best way to have the last word in an argument is to apologize. Right. And so it's a great way to transition to what's next. And then the 3rd one, practice patience with the other person's process. Don't try to dictate that process if you're the one who's made the mistake. And then if you're the one who's affected by the mistake, be honest about how the mistake made you feel. Like, don't put up a front. Don't lie. Don't be disingenuous. Be honest about how it made you feel.
Yeah.
And be honest about what you need. If that's, hey, I need a bit of space, that's fine. But remember, space is always carved out for the sake and the intention of reconnecting, of reconciliation.
And if part of that honesty is, hey, I want to bring this to someone else.
Bring it to
I
a
want
counselor,
you and
to a
I
friend.
to find trusted older couple who, choose someone who's doing life well, who's doing marriage, committed to one another. Obviously, there's criteria for who you choose. Both people need to be comfortable.
Yes.
You need to feel safety bringing it to someone. But that is what the body is meant to be for.
Absolutely.
Where you can go to someone who's further along in their marriage journey and say, hey, here is
not your sister, not your brother, not your peer, someone who's further along in their marriage journey. Yeah. Probably not your parents either. They're probably not the right fit.
And
I'm being honest.
But they might be. I mean, I can think of situations where, they
the leave and cleave dynamic can get challenging there, but yeah.
And the body is broad.
It is.
Broad body.
There are people out there.
And
broad body.
I just can't. I can't even continue. I lost it. I totally lost it.
But the point is, there are couples who are looking for purpose too, like even older couples, and view their life's purpose in this season is like giving away what they have gathered over decades of hardship, and they have wisdom and they have things to offer. And so you're not doing something that they wouldn't desire you to do by reaching out, right, and asking for help. So within the body, like that's their season. They love that.
And if you keep coming up against the same thing over and over again, you need a disrupting force. And bringing someone else in, bringing a totally outside perspective can be invaluable. Yeah. So we highly, highly recommend that.
We do. And if you're not subscribed yet to the podcast, be sure to do that and comment and let us know what you'd like us to tackle.
They're like, well, we want that 5-1
the 5-1
framework.
Like we want the 5-1 framework. And we'll bring that out next time. Okay. Love, will you pray us out?
Sure. Oh God, you're so good. You created us, and you have moved through more conflict with humans than we can possibly imagine. I thank you that your spirit will lead and guide and facilitate healthy conflict that moves us into deeper intimacy. God, I thank you that everyone under the sound of my voice will just be prompted to give the effort, to give the energy, to do marriage well, to really put themselves out there, to do relationship well. Wherever there's opportunity for growth, where you can confront and you can recognize that we don't want to settle. We don't want to settle for less than what is true, and where there is freedom in relationship, God. I thank you that you will continue to prompt us, lead us, guide us. We don't have to do this alone, and I ask that we will not settle for doing it alone. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.